as we discuss muscle tissue, I'm sure you'll all realize that all muscles are contractile tissues. That includes all three types that we have talked about. Again, when we're discussing the muscular system, we're going to focus on skeletal muscle and how those muscles are going to interact to create movement. In this section, we're going to talk about the criteria for muscles, and in the next session, we're going to have a very, very brief overview of the principles of leverage and what type of lever you absolutely positively need to know about. After that, we'll tackle the actual named structures of muscles. When you're talking about the actions and interactions of these skeletal muscles, you have to remember that they can never push, they can only pull. And as you know, what one group of muscles does, you have to have an equal and opposite reaction, and therefore another group or another muscle has to undo the primary action. We have discussed the terms that we're going to go over quickly in these next few slides. We've already talked about prime mover, which is the muscle that has the major responsibility for producing a specific action. We know that each prime mover will have an antagonist, which is going to oppose or reverse that movement of the prime mover. And the reason that we have that is because we do not want the joint which sits between them to get damaged, because of course the prime mover and the antagonists will be on opposite sides of the joint upon which they act. We know that synergists are going to work in concert with the prime movers. They're going to add extra force to the same movement, and therefore they're going to help limit any unnecessary movement. And a fixator is going to be a synergist that's actually going to immobilize the bone or the structure that is the muscle's origin. In essence, what it does is give the prime mover a really stable base upon which it can act. This just gives you the examples of some of the movements that we talked about when we talked about the skeletal system, as well as some muscles that are associated with those movements. Now, I'm sure it makes sense that the same muscle may be a prime mover in terms of one motion and an antagonist for the opposite motion, and a synergist for yet another motion or movement. So how do we actually name skeletal muscles? There are a number of criteria which are sometimes mixed together. So muscle location, when you talk about the gluteals, for example, you know where they're going to sit. When you talk about the erector spinae, you know they're going to be associated with the spine. Sometimes they are named for either their shape or their size. So the deltoid muscle is triangular because deltoid is associated in Greek with a triangle. When you talk about size, maximus means largest, hence gluteus maximus. Minimus is the smallest, gluteus minimus. And longus, so you might have adductor longus, and if you have a longus, you have to have a brevis. So there will be adductor brevis. Another way that we might name muscles, or another criteria by which we will name muscles, is through the directions of the fibers or the fascicles. When you talk about rectus, the fibers are running straight. Transversus, the fibers are going to run parallel to the floor at right angles. And if you hear oblique, you know that the fibers have to run at angles to some sort of made-up axis. Sometimes we name them after the number of origins. So we have two sets of biceps muscles, biceps brachii, two heads or two origins, or biceps femoris, two origins. Triceps brachii has 3 origins, hence the tri. The location of attachments will also provide a great criteria for naming muscles. So brachioradialis, because that is named for the point of origin as well as the point of insertion. The origin is generally named first. Again, brachioradialis. Sometimes muscles are named for the action which they engage in. So flexor, extensor, supinator. You have a couple of pronator muscles. And oftentimes several criteria are combined to give you a lot of information about the muscles. So if you hear extensor carpi radialis longus, you can have a good idea of what that muscle does, how long it is, and where it originates and inserts.